As promised, we're at week 2 of our Path of Integrity program, which is following the Joseph story. And last week, just probably worth taking some time to recap what happened last week. Last week, Joseph has his dreams. The sheaves of his brothers all bow down to his, and the stars and the moon and all bow down to him. And as you might imagine, the brothers weren't too pleased about this. What? You're saying we're going to bow down to you? Yeah, Joseph probably wasn't really bright in telling them, brothers, these dreams, and as a result, they threw him into a pit and sold him off to the Midianites. And so off he goes, and what we were talking about as far as a meaning in this story for us is that all these brothers represent competing ruling loves. What's the love that's going to run your life? Joseph represents the basic idea of being a good person. Joseph wants to be good. And the other brothers say, oh no, I want to win, or I want to have power, or I want to have this, right? All those different things. And being nice doesn't always feel like a good pathway to achieving goals in the material world. So those brothers say, off you go, Joseph, we're done with you. But the idea here for us is that we are supposed to listen to Joseph. We are supposed to say, hey, this dream that Joseph has of being in charge, this is the dream we have for ourselves of being a good person. You say, okay, you know what, I'm not perfect. I have some places I need to work on. The dream version of myself is this. And don't get rid of it. Listen to Joseph, the dreamer. So that's kind of where we're at. There's, of course, kicking and screaming along the way as we are trying to become this person, but nevertheless, the idea is to persevere in this endeavor. One of the things that in the Path of Integrity workbook that they've given to us is that we are supposed to be taking some time to ask ourselves about the dream and say, well, okay, is this dream possible? And hopefully yes. And is this dream useful? Yeah, I think my dream's useful. But then we get to the third question that gets asked about the dream, and that is, are you willing to do what it takes to manifest that? And usually that's where people start getting off the bus. They say, oh, I got to give up something that I like? Oh, yeah, no, I really want to be this, but I don't know that I want to be this badly to give up that stuff that I like. So this week gets into that, where it's titled Drop the Distractions. And it's, are you willing to give up something that you might like to be continuing doing in order to be that dream version of yourself? Are you willing to put in the extra effort? Are you willing to slog through some unpleasantness, give up some pleasantness? And that's really the key, actually. It's the giving up of something. It's not go do this other thing. It's stop doing this bad thing. That's the give up, that's the distractions. So in this story, the key players are Joseph, and he ends up in the house of Potiphar. Now, he's in charge of everything in Potiphar's house. Things are going pretty well for him, actually. And what ends up happening is Potiphar's wife starts to seduce Joseph. Now, the symbolism here is that women in general in the Bible represent our emotional side, if you will, our will, our drive, our desires. Men in general represent our intellectual processes, our thoughts. And so what you see in this story is this tension between the two sides of our life. How many times do we let emotions rule our lives? And how many times do we let our intellectual side rule our life? And we have to be careful with this dynamic because the emotions, well, they don't always lead us to something good, right? How many times have you had an experience perhaps in your younger years where you told somebody off, They had annoyed you to some great extent, and finally you broke and you said, "Da da 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 da," and you felt good about it for a little while. And then you said, "Oh, probably shouldn't have done that." But in the moment, it can feel good. Our emotions can deceive us. Our emotions can trick us. And so this story has some of that dynamic to it. So without further setup, I'm going to read up along the story of Joseph and Potiphar. The scripture says, "Now Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, 'Come to bed with me.' But he refused. 'With me in charge,' he said, 'my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns has been entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you. You are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?'" I love this. I love this story. Like, David, I've told this before, has the 5 smooth stones, and these are the things you use to combat against hell when temptation arrives. This line for, "How could I do such a wicked thing?" That's a good smooth stone in my book. How could I do such a wicked thing? This guy is technically in prison, but he realizes, he has the gratitude to say, "Hey, everything in this house is up for grabs, except one thing." Tell me, have we heard this story before? Have anything in the garden except this one thing. And unlike Adam and Eve, Joseph says, "I'm not going to have the one thing. How could I do such a wicked thing?" Joseph clearly has more gratitude in his heart than Adam and Eve did. Right? How could I do this? I love it. How could I do that and sin against God? He's been so good to me. So what does Joseph do, right? He exits stage right. He gets out. I'm not going to be near this woman. I am going to separate myself from her. I am going away. He refused to go to bed with her and even be with her, right? He knows the temptation. I'm not going to sit on the fence and debate this. I'm just going to get out of here. Just going to get away from it. So it goes on, the story says, "One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, 'Come to bed with me.' But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants and said, 'Look, that Hebrew who has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came here to sleep with me, but I screamed, and when he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house.' She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him the story. 'That Hebrew slave you brought us came to make sport of me, but as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house.' When his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, 'This is how your slave treated me,' he burned with anger. And so Joseph's master took him and put him in prison." So Joseph, he had an opportunity to be distracted. If we're keeping with the verbiage of our program, drop the distractions. He had an opportunity to be distracted. Personally, 17-year-old boy gets, tempted by an attractive woman. That's more than just a distraction, right? That's a severe temptation for the young man. Come to bed with me? Oh, he's going to have some work to do on that one. But I like how he responds. I'm fleeing. I'm getting out of here. This is a good way to avoid temptation. Sometimes our distractions are hopefully not so severe, not so spiritually bad. Sometimes our distractions are just that. They're distractions. We get into a routine of life. This is just how I do things. And we fail to see that the way we do things is distracting us from a better version of ourselves. Sometimes our emotions are the ones pulling us back, saying, I like this. I've always done this. I enjoy this. But they're distracting us from that better version of ourself. If you think about it, can you imagine that? Is that one thing holding you back from that better version of yourself? Is it worth it? Sometimes we prioritize the familiar. This is the way I've always done it. Because we can't really believe the impossible version of ourselves that we project for ourselves. It's hard. And yet, this is why even psychologists agree with theologists that the mind has levels. Right? You have a basic level of the mind, helps you navigate the world. Okay, don't touch that, that's hot. Don't run on the street, you're going to get run over. And you have a next level of the mind. And that middle level looks down at the first level and says, hey, is that a good idea? And it says, are you incorporating spirituality into your decisions about navigating the world? Well, then you have another level of the mind that looks down at that middle level. And that highest level says, are you considering God in the equation here and how you do spirituality and how you navigate the world? And the problem is all three layers of these minds can be corrupted to some extent, which is why we have the Word. Because if bad emotions are running the top, it filters down, and the Word is supposed to be an impartial observer. So, we ask ourselves, am I doing what God's asked me to do? Am I following the rules so that I can achieve the impossible? Right? This is the process that Joseph has to go through. This is a process we all have to go through. Are we following this path of integrity? Joseph is saying, how can I do this terrible thing? God's been so good to me. How can I do this? But, as you know, as we just read, Joseph ends up in prison. And so he's continually being tested. This is the kicking and screaming part, right? We're going to have to be a better version of ourselves, but it's not going to be easy. And so here's what happens next. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them after they had been in custody for some time. Each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in the master's house, "Why are your faces so sad today?" Well, they answered, "We have both had dreams, but there's no one able to interpret them." And Joseph said, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream, and he said to him, "In my dream, I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine there were 3 branches. And as soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, and I squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I put the cup into Pharaoh's hand." "This is what it means," Joseph said. 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison, for I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." When the chief baker saw this favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head there were 3 baskets of bread, and on the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh. But birds were eating out of them, eating out of the basket on my head." And Joseph said, "This is what it means. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you to a tree, and the birds will eat away your flesh. Now the third day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the head of the cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. But he restored the chief cupbearer to his position, so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in their interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. Sounds like a bad day for the baker, right? Why does the baker get a bad interpretation and the cupbearer get a good one? Again, no surprise, it comes down to symbolism. What do these things mean? Well, you have two things going on here with the cupbearer. One, what is he doing? He's getting grapes, squeezing them, giving them to Pharaoh, right? Giving fruit, right? Jesus says, how do you know a good prophet from a bad one? Good fruit, right? So the cupbearer is bearing good fruit. And what do grapes represent? Truth. So there's truth, which grapes, of course, get turned into wine. So you have some good knowledge being passed on to the ruler. Good job, cupbearer. But the chief baker, what happens with his story? Bread. Bread represents goodness, right? We're going to have bread with Holy Supper. Bread represents goodness. Yay. What happens to this bread? Eaten by birds. Is something useful happening with the goodness that the chief baker is providing? No, it is not. That which is useful in a person's life is being carried away by the birds. All right, birds represent thoughts. So it's like our thoughts, our distractions are coming away, taking the useful stuff of our life and flitting away with it. So, some people can take this a little too far and say, that means you have to be hardworking and useful 100% of the time, no time for fun. Well, that's not what this story is saying. It's saying, yes, you have your purpose in life, attend to it, and don't let your entire life be thrown away to the birds. So, we have to be mindful of what our loves are, be careful about what we're choosing to put our efforts into, and make sure that the world isn't consuming them and running off with them. So this is why the cupbearer survives. He's giving something on to Pharaoh, right? The ruler of the land. So if you start trying to find out examples in our life how you apply this, well, I hate to pick on it, but smoking's an easy example because it's one of these things where most smokers know they would like to not smoke. Most smokers say, yeah, I'd rather not, but there's some level of enjoyment in it for them. And so there's this confluence where there's conflict in their own mind. I'm addicted to this. I kind of enjoy it. I'd be better off without it. I know this isn't good for me, but this kind of goes round and around. And at a certain point, a person dealing with any sort of addiction is in a prison, right? Like Joseph, in a prison. So how do you get out of the prison? Well, something's got to go. In this case, in this story, it's the baker who has to go. The thing that is the goodness, the thing that we love in our life, that's got to go. The Lord's telling us that the knowledge, the wisdom, the stuff that comes from the Word, that stays. The cupbearer stays. But the thing that you love, that's probably where your problem is. It's probably why you're stuck in a prison, because that which you love is holding you captive. So do you want to be prisoner to, it doesn't have to be an addiction. It can just be a prisoner to the person that you already are. You're so wedded to your own identity as to who you think you are that you can't grasp the vision that God has for your life. Right? Sometimes we just don't have the vision for our lives that God does. He says, yeah, you're here and you're okay. But boy, follow Joseph. Follow that dream that I've set up for your life. In true Christian religion, it tells us about this partnership that we're supposed to be engaging with God on. And it's number 126, and it says, spiritual tests lead to a partnership with God. During our spiritual tests, we are apparently left completely alone. Right? Imagine Joseph feeling quite alone there, right? Although we are in fact not alone. At those times, God is most intimately present at our deepest level, giving us support. And because of that inner presence, when any of us have had success in a spiritual test, we form a partnership with God at the deepest level. So yeah, Joseph feels alone. I'm in prison. And the Lord's saying, no, I am right there with you. I'm right there with you. You've probably seen the poster, it was around forever, where it's, 4 footsteps on the beach. And it's God saying, yeah, I'm with you all these years. And then the person says, but wait, in this spot there's only 2 sets of footprints instead of 4, but this was the most difficult part of my life. And Lord responds to the person and says, well, that's when I was carrying you. Right? God's always with us. He's always with us. No matter what the point of your life you're in, He's there. So the point is that we're supposed to be making this partnership with God and stop fighting Him. And it's hard because there are things that we have just learned to enjoy. Maybe you've always enjoyed them. And the Lord's saying, no, drop those distractions. Stop being pulled away by those things that you enjoy and start asking yourself, are these the things that I'm supposed to enjoy? Right? You've got to identify what it is, right? That's the dream. Identify what it is that you want it to be. And now the path gets set up and you say, okay, can I stop all the excuses? Can I get rid of the self-pity? Can I drop the blame? I don't need the guilt. Take a pass on the self-immolation, right? You don't need to do those things. It's just a simple acknowledgement. I shouldn't be doing this. I don't have to, grind myself into a pulp over it. Just, I shouldn't be doing this. Can I get rid of all those excuses and move forward? Identify that dream, work on the challenges to get there. Make that dream a reality. Otherwise, you end up stuck in Egypt, stuck in the prison. And that's not where you want to be. That's not where you want to be. You want to put Joseph in charge. And with that, as we can see with this story, it all turns out well. It takes some time, but it does all come good for Joseph. And in the end, he realizes that, oh yes, this was done for a reason. Not to destroy lives, but to save lives. And it's a message for your life too. The Lord's saying, I'm not asking to change these things to destroy your life. I am here to save your life. Amen.
Thank you for listening. To learn more, visit newchurch.org.